How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, great discussion today. Search smarter by thinking like the inmate who doesn't want you to find it. 13 strategic search tips with real-world examples and discussion prompts. Now, guys, mind you, it took me a couple of days to figure this out because I went back through a lot of discussions that I had with Russ. Not even just discussions we put on video, but discussions that me and Russ have had, just talking like we usually do, especially when preparing for show topics. Also, stuff that we've written before. And I wanted to put something together that's very definitive. Now, guys, I'm going to try to push this show as quick as I can, but there's going to be a lot of information here that we're going to provide today. And hopefully what we could do is make this into a book. And I thought what I could do is after the show is done, I've given Russ the notes that I've taken from all the different shows that we did together. And mind you, these are shows led by Russ. Russ is the expert in this area, not me. And I also thought Russ could also take the transcript, and then maybe Russ could go ahead and put another book together to partner very well with a book that he now has on the market about complacency. But let's get the intro going. Hey, Russ, I know we're having a lot of technical difficulties today, so hopefully this gets this right now. I hope this will work. Russ, but you mind
introducing yourself? Sure. You know what? My introduction just keeps getting longer and longer and longer over the years, Anthony. And they're gonna see here in a minute, really. So my name's Russ Hamilton. I began my career with California Department of Corrections back in 1989 at San Quentin State Prison. I went on later to promote to sergeant and do all of those things. From there, I ended up, after I retired, I became a senior juvenile correctional officer. And then I went from that to the job that I do now, which is I'm a case manager at a local county jail for a private company where we do reentry and rehabilitation work. And that's also along with a county probation department. Now, besides all of that, I also happen to be the founder of Keepers of Chaos with a K on Facebook. And we do a lot of like mentorship. We do content, we do history, we do training, just regular camaraderie for anyone and everyone that works for corrections, whether you have a badge or not. And then most recently, I think I've got to everything there. Most recently, I'm a new author for a book called Killing Complacency. And it's tactical awareness for correctional professionals, essential strategies to prevail in the high threat environment of modern corrections. This book has the potential, I believe, to save lives. And so complacency is one of those things that always gets blamed in different situations, but no one ever seems to address it. And I think that's part of what complacency is. So that's it for me for right now.
No, yes, and hopefully this could be turned into a book recently, soon, whatever. So, okay, guys, as you know, I also got other books on the market as well. If you guys go to Blue 360 Media, you'll see that I have a lot of books out there that they publish, but also on my own, I got a few ebooks out there as well as some soft covers. So right now, you guys are probably familiar with Inmate Manipulation Decoded. That's available both soft cover as well as ebook, and so is Breaking Boundaries. These books focus on manipulation, undue familiarity. But I also have some books out there that are just ebook right now. We have Surviving Without a Mentor. So again, 100 deep cut tips for rookie correctional staff. We have Rank Before Ready, 100 subtle survival tips for new correctional leaders. We got Warden's Wisdom, 100 subtle lessons in prison leadership. We have Corrections Interrupted, how to rebuild after a critical incident. We also have From Reaction to Reputation, a rookie correctional officer's guide to discretion, authority, and earning command presence. We also have Behind the Gate, a civilian's guide to navigating correctional facilities. We have From Tension to Teamwork, Healing the Custody Medical Divide in Corrections. And obviously, now we're going to have books. Russ's book on the market about complacency. Hopefully, his book on searches. Guys, I mean, we really have so much material out there for you guys that are not just tactical driven, but they're psychological. And that's what today's discussion about searches is going to be about. We're going to go beyond the tactical, which is what you mostly get is just the tactical in training. We are going to now also dive into both the tactical and the psychological. So what I'm going to do is I got a lot of reading to go through. Tip one, I think, And tip 6 or 7 is a very detailed tip. The other ones we can kind of speed through, but I wanted to provide a lot of examples. So I have literally did a lot of research to come up with some of these examples that will be utilized, especially for tips 1 and tip 6, but or 7. And then all 13 tips have come from just our discussions in the past, but we're going to basically explore them. You know, I think they've evolved since we've last done them. So I think it's a good time for us to revisit. So Russ, I'm going to read some and then once in a while ask some questions. So right now, what do I have? Inmate concealment is a psychological game first and a physical one second. They don't just hide things, they hide intent. That's why effective searching is about pattern recognition, behavioral awareness, and instinct refinement. These 13 principles can train your eye and your gut. So, Russ, why is it so important that correctional staff approach searches as a behavioral science and not just a procedural task?
So let me just say that the way I break it down inside my own head, and this is actually useful for the search. It's not just something I think about. You have to have a philosophy behind what you do. So my philosophy was this. There's two different types of searches. There's exclusionary searches, which really suck bad because it just means you're going into an area and you're making sure that it's devoid of contraband. Very low probability that you're going to come up under situations like that. Still can be done. Did it a lot. And then the second one is you're doing a search based off of something, some type of intelligence that you get, some type of observation you made, some type of believe it or not, certain traps and things that you can lay for individuals. Sometimes you work certain individuals under a certain set of situations to actually figure out, who is actually holding the contraband. And so that's where I go with that. And so those are just things that you should be aware of. If you're the type of officer that you just go out there and you do your 5 little area searches or locker searches each day, you're not being a contraband hound. You're just, filling a spot. So what I do is I try and, maximize my chances. And this is what I always told everyone is that I didn't teach people to search. I taught people how to find. And so that's what my philosophy on the subject is.
Yes. And guys, by the way, again, this is already knowledge that, maybe at some point you're taught at a very simplistic level, but we're going to advance it. We're taking our years of experience and we are now trying our best to provide that forward to you guys. So the first thing I got, tip number 1, is going to be look for the unusually ordinary. So this is one of the bigger tips, so bear with me. So sometimes what blends in best stands out the most. A Bible that never opened, a food wrapper that's always there but never in use, a locker that's just a little too perfect. I had an example here where a veteran officer noticed a state-issued cereal box that had been sitting in plain sight for weeks. It looked untouched, but when opened, it was hollowed out and lined with plastic, and it was holding a flip phone. Now, I have some examples here. Now, Russ, feel free to stop me along the way because not only do I have examples, I have what to look for during a search when you are dealing with each one of these examples. And guys, I Googled a lot and looked for information across different corrections. And this is the stuff that I came up with. So it's pretty interesting. So I got obviously a Bible with pages carefully hollowed out containing medication strips hidden in a cutout compartment. So what to look for during the search, you got page tension, feel for tightness or uneven pressure when flipping pages, cut edges, slight irregularities, especially if pages have been re-glued or clumped, cover lift, gently bend the front back covers for abnormal rigidity, and spine distortion. Press along the spine to detect tampering or bulges. I also have a sealed cereal box that had been on the shelf for weeks, never touched, but when opened, it contained a disassembled cell phone. So what to look for during a search? Weight test. Weigh the box in hand. Contraband adds unexpected heaviness. Sound shift. Gently shake the box. The phone doesn't sound like cereal. Seal irregularities. Inspect the bottom flap for resealing glue or heat tampering and box condition. Look for dust-free or too perfect packaging on an otherwise aged shelf. Now, I know you had some thoughts on this one, Russ, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things when we're looking for the ways that they conceal things. Sometimes they're really good at it, but sometimes they'll make mistakes. A little clump of glue, for instance, or something won't line up quite right, or it just feels a little bit heavy. I've seen guys, make soda cans that, if you're just looking at it, from a distance, it seems okay. You can even pick it up. They've put some liquid in there. Sometimes they would stuff it full of toilet paper, and it's the right heft, the right weight. But then you start fiddling with the top of that can, and it would come right off. And so these are the things you have to look for, little idiosyncrasies that just add up to it not being quite right. You don't necessarily have the time in your day to go into everyone's locker and start pouring stuff out, although I've done that, and I do recommend it because, sometimes when you're coming up dry for a long time, you got to make something happen. So, I would always bring, things with me to be able to, pour out coffee or whatever it was, to do all of those things. Have a good light, have a good mirror. And we'll talk about a couple of other things that I would always bring along, maybe a little bit later on in this. And be curious. We don't assume that anything you see is the same way. And maybe I'll give some more examples as we get through this. I hope I don't forget any.
No, no. And number one is one of the bigger tips, and so is number 6 or 7. But after that, these other tips they should speed through. But this is a bigger tip. So we also have a deodorant stick that appeared new and unused, but had a removable core concealing pills. What to look for during a search. Check alignment. Notice if the cap or base doesn't line up perfectly. Flashlight deception. Shine into the stick to spot opacity or loose contents. Weight field.
Yeah,
Okay, Russ.
yeah, that's one of the big things with a flashlight for me. You have to have as bright a flashlight as you can, and you can go through lots of deodorant sticks really fast because the light tends to shine right through them, and so you can see little things that they put in there. Used to catch lots of tattooing needles, for instance, that they would hide in that stuff, and sometimes dope, and other things. And so, those are all things. Good bright flashlight, absolutely essential. Sometimes you can use the same technique on soap, although it's harder. Like on the Irish Spring, it's hard to see. But you know what? If you see, because I've seen where these guys will melt soap down and make a sand. Make a sand mold, and then they can pour it back in there and everything looks cool. And so, you can hide, 15, 20 hits of heroin and something like that. So, if it comes down to it, take a piece of wire and cut the soap in half, whatever it takes to make sure that, you're on point and that you're getting what you're looking to find.
Yeah, and if Russ ever does a class on this, he's going to have to make all these things. I have 2 more things related to deodorant. Weight feel, so a full stick should feel solid. So if emptiness or heaviness may indicate tampering. And tactile rotation, rotating the internal mechanism when empty often feels loose or unnatural. I also got a pair of state sneakers that looked unworn. Soles were sliced and re-glued, hiding tobacco. So what to look for during a search. Inspect physical integrity. Look for unnatural seams, glue residue, or unusual resistance. Check for added weight or abnormal balance. Use light pressure to test for hollow points or flexible surfaces, and compare against a known good version if possible. Factory-made items should match expected design. Actually, let me show you a picture of some of this stuff. Hold on a second. I got some pictures that I found online real quick. This was the Bible. It's got, as you can see, it was cut out. There's some pills there. This was let me just move this. That was the Frosted Flakes. This was the deodorant, as you could see. And then this was the sneakers. Inside was, and I found another one.
Nice.
Yeah, and I found another one here. Thought they were interesting. Okay, so let me go back to where we were. Let's see. I got a roll of toilet paper hollowed in the center and resealed containing tattoo ink tubes. What to look for during a search. Inspect physical integrity. Look for unnatural seams, glue residue, or unusual resistance. Again, check for added weight or abnormal balance. Use light pressure to test for hollow points or flexible surfaces. Kind of repetitive here. Compare against a known good version if possible. Factory made items should match expected design. So here's the cool thing. If you guys notice, we're finding consistency here. I noticed a few times, Russ, we're talking about change of weight. We're talking about actually having something to compare it to, which is good. We're talking about check for unnatural seams, glue residue. So there's a lot of consistency here that we're finding across different items, correct?
Yeah, and this is like one of the areas where you really want to consider what your eyes are seeing. I'll never forget me and one of my old partners. We actually had a source tell us about where something was hidden one time, and I didn't usually use snitches, but this one time he just wanted me to help him out with this, and the snitch kept saying, "Hey, there is a place inside this bathroom. And there's a vault in there, and it's huge, and it has all kinds of stuff in it." And we went in there, and everywhere we looked, we couldn't figure it out. And then finally, I was looking up in this one area. I said, "Hey, what about that up there?" And I took my thumbnail and I scratched where the grout was, and it just kind of like this fine powder, almost kind of like what you would expect in a place where it's really old. And I thought that just doesn't seem right. Probably something I shouldn't have done was I like smelled it a little bit, and it smelled like toothpaste. And so I thought, well, if that's toothpaste, there's a reason for that. And so we kept working this tile, and I don't know how they did it because it took forever, and we couldn't get that tile out. And finally, I was really convinced that this was the spot because they had definitely sealed it up with toothpaste. We found other indicators where they'd been up there. And so finally, I took my baton and I broke it out. And there was just a cavity back there that you could completely reach into, multiple cell phones, lots of weapons, lots of tattoo gear, the whole 9 yards. And so though that little bit of a giveaway of just, seeing that, that dried toothpaste that looked like grout in there was the thing that finally sealed it for me and gave me the courage to break the tile and not have to explain myself to my sergeant.
Now, guys, if you notice, and maybe I'll say when it comes up, but again, I think even if Russ decides to create the book, I mean, these consistent things to do during a search, it seems to show up a lot. So I have a prayer rug that was never on roll, was found to have stitched compartments with sharpened plastic, and it says the same thing. Inspect physical integrity, check for added weight or abnormal balance, use light pressure to test for hollow points or flexible surfaces, and compare against a known good version if possible. I love that, comparing with a known item. Like I love if it's great if your facility sells these sneakers, it'd be great to have one nearby so you know what one feels like versus one that could have been adjusted a little bit or altered. So I got a hygiene bag that always stayed perfectly packed, had the false bottom glued in place with toothpaste. So again, what to look for, you still have inspect physical integrity, look for unnatural seams, etc. Check for added weight, use light pressure to test for hollow points, flexible, we got that, and compare against a known good version if possible. Hey, Russ, it says using toothpaste as glue.
Yeah, toothpaste, it just has enough tackiness that, sometimes you can, I mean, I've seen them, like sometimes they'll use toothpaste to just, like put up a greeting card in their locker or something like that. And so as it starts to dry out, that tackiness kind of stays. And so it's just whatever you can seal it with, and it doesn't always stand up to the test of, being rough or tough with it, but it's enough that, most officers see it and think, oh, that looks good. And that's enough for them.
Yeah. So again, I got a TV remote that appeared normal, but had internal space hollowed out to store wires and a SIM card. So same thing, specs physical integrity, check for added weight and normal balance, use light pressure for hollow points or flexible surfaces, compare against a known good version if possible. So guys, obviously a lot of these that we find, they do have those four things consistent. Then we have a shampoo bottle that had liquid poured out and replaced with hooch, resealed with melted plastic. This has checked for uneven fill levels or unusual liquid smells. Inspect the cap and seal area for melt marks or glue residue. Shake and listen. Alcohol moves differently than gel or soap, and compare weight and color with a known issued bottle. Hey, I like this part, Russ, when it comes to the alcohol with the in comparison to gel or soap. Shake and listen. Is there a difference there when you're shaking it up?
Yeah, like gels and shampoos and stuff tend to, not rock back and forth with just a simple shaking. If something has, more of the traditional kind of pruno in it, so to speak, it'll make a lot more of that. Plus, you're likely to detect the smell before you detect anything else. And I wish I could remember exactly this story we had about one of our inmates invocations coming back through at the end of the day. He had his tumbler with him, and your tumbler was, something that, hey, if it goes out there, it's supposed to come back empty or whatever. But he had something, he had some water or something in it, or so he said. And so anyway, they looked at it and they told him to pour it out. He goes, "No, it's perfectly good." And he drank, quite a bit of it. But what it turned out later is there was another liquid that had a different specific gravity, other than water, that would go down to the bottom. And I forget exactly what he was using that for, but I think it was for being able to maybe thin some paint or something, where he was, actually doing some other work to try and conceal some things. So these guys are clever. Never put anything past them.
Yes, I got a few more items here. I have a folded towel always sitting on a bedpost, had a seam carefully stitched shut. Inside was a makeshift shank. Here, they felt the seam areas for stiffness, bumps, or uneven stitching. Again, apply light pressure to detect internal resistance or structure. Compare stitching to other facility issued towels. I love, again, that thought about comparing. And then I'll look for overly tight or decorative folds that conceal depth. Does that make sense to you, Russ?
Yeah, I think it's just, where they're, able to make things look like they're in a little bit of disarray, yet are, kind of like put into a position where they can put something deeper into a fold or something. Sometimes people are running out of time and, stick their head in the cell, look around, nothing obvious, and that's good enough. And really it's not good enough, but, we work with what we've got. I'll bring up, I've talked about this before, almost anything that you see in a cell, around a cell, in a day room, is something that you make assumptions about. You look at it and you assume that, oh, that's a concrete wall there. Well, is it? Inmates, and I've seen this done, is, they'll take a piece of, thicker cardboard and, hammer it against a wall, and then it takes on the dimpling from the other side, and as well as where the grout lines are, if they're cinder block, and then, they can make that look like a wall in and of itself. And, how much time do we actually take? Or I've seen where they'll hollow out where the grout is, and, put a phone in there, and, maybe they're still in some silicone and a little bit of paint, and it looks good. So we have to question our environment. I brought up before about, this grout that was made out of toothpaste rather than real grout. And so our eyes will deceive us and tell us that it looks good when it really isn't.
Yeah, and guys, this goes to show, as we're reading through it, how long actual searches should be taking, because this is not something that you could just breeze through. So let me go through a few more. I got a plastic bowl with a glued double wall bottom used to hide matches and rolling paper. What to look for here was check for color inconsistencies or visible glue lines around the base. Tap or flick the bottom. A hollow bowl will sound different. Examine factory seams for tampering or for bubbling, and feel for weight that doesn't match the size of the material. I also saw a stack of magazines on a locker shelf where the middle magazine had a concealed cavity in the spine. What to look for: feel for hard inserts or unnatural stiffness along the spine.
Oh,
Compare. Oh, wait, let me get these last three, Russ, and I'll
okay.
compare magazine thickness. A tampered one may bulge. Look for page misalignment or edge warping, and use a flashlight at an angle to catch surface distortions. Okay, Russ, sorry about that.
Yeah. So going back to what things appear to be a little bit. I know we actually did a short video on this for Tier Talk many years ago now. A lot of the plastic containers that they get from the canteen and so forth actually have a built-in false bottom, where if you take and put enough pressure on that, the area that contains the salve or the hair gel or whatever it is in there will actually pop out, and it leaves that false bottom behind, and they will hide things in there. And that's I think that one on Tier Talk is called a general search tip or something like that. And so sometimes it's not even things that they've manufactured. And it's very easy to, overlook things like that. And I used to find stuff in hair gel containers like that all the time.
All right. And I also have here a state issue calendar on the wall, untouched for weeks. Behind it was a hole in the wall filled with tobacco pouches. What to look for during a search: check for excessive tape or tacks holding a lightweight calendar. Look behind, never touched items hung at eye level. Gently feel the wall behind or for flex or hollow points, and note any resistance when trying to remove the item. I also have a uniform cap placed neatly on the bed daily, was being used to store folded bedding slips and contraband notes. So what to look for: squeeze the cap brim for paper like resistance or creases. Look for abnormal stiffness or layers in the fabric lining. Shake or flick to detect something loose inside. Inspect stitching along the sweatband or bill. I have a bunk tag was altered with a hinge to form a mini hiding compartment behind the ID placard. So what to look for during a search: tug gently on bunk ID tags to check for movement or flexibility. Check screw heads or rivets for signs of tampering or mismatched hardware. Look at tag alignment. Shifted or uneven tags may be hinged, and shine a flashlight behind the tag for light bleed or gaps. I also have a stack of ramen noodles in original plastic packaging, had one open from the bottom, hollowed and re-glued. So what to look for during a search kind of falls in what we discussed before. Inspect bottom seams for glue lines or inconsistent seal patterns. Look for boxes with one corner more squared than the other. Gently squeeze to feel hollow pockets in the center, and compare package weight with the known good noodle block. Hey, Russ, look for boxes with one corner more squared than the others. What is that?
So I'm trying to think exactly what that would be, except that it could possibly be where they've taken and put inside where the triple corner comes on a box. It's easy to put something in there that rounds it out a little bit to hide it. It's the only thing that I can come up with. Coming back to some of those other things, I think I may have brought this up in other conversations. We had a vocations department where when we were redoing dorms, we would ship all of the lockers to the back, and the inmates back there would sand the lockers and then repaint them. And, some of the, not so hip on things, free staff back there weren't watching close enough. And so they were also going in there with sheet metal and tack welding it to the back of the lockers and making an actual false backing. So, who can tell that apart when it's actually, tacked with real welds and just has an area, where they could, barely like slip in a cell phone or some things like that. So question everything, take nothing for granted. And, if it all comes down to it, measure, take a stick with you or something like that and measure and see how far the bottom is from the outside to where the bottom is on the inside. And I used to catch things like that. One that they used to use a lot because they could get the round oatmeal cans is they would just cut out a piece of cardboard that same size and put it down. And I can't tell you how many syringes and things like that I would find in those oatmeal containers.
I got a few more here to wrap up tip 1. And as I said, tip 6 or 7 will be like this, but the rest should speed through. So a legal mail envelope that looked official but had a double lining where contraband was taped inside. So got obviously legal mail they feel is more protected. So there is a good reason for them to hide it there because they feel we may not look as thoroughly. What to look for during a search. Flex the envelope between your fingers to feel hidden layers. Use backlight to spot shadows of internal objects. Check the thicker than normal edges of folders or folded seams. So again, check the thicker than normal edges or folded seams and compare envelope thickness with others from the same sender. A plastic comb in a hygiene kit was split and resealed, holding a thin metal needle. So what to look for during a search, gently bend the comb to feel internal rigidity or seams. Check for glue residue at teeth or handle joints. Look for faint color difference across the comb and run fingers along edges for sharpness or tension. So this is unique. A plastic comb in a hygiene kit was split and resealed, hiding a thin metal needle. That would be more for tattooing, correct, Russ? Or drug use?
Yeah, well, more likely tattooing. But I've also seen where these guys had smuggled in like real needles. One of the things that you can do with real needles, and by that I mean sewing needles, is you can take the seams apart in mattresses and put things in there. And all you do is you make sure that the needle re-enters exactly where the original manufacturer was. And so you can look for differences in the types of threading that's going in there, but sometimes they'll save that. I've seen that happen more than once. A lot of times on those, if there's a bad seam or something's coming apart, I know nobody wants to replace that stuff because it costs money and stuff, but do it anyway. We used to come in and make sure that all the seams were good, and then turn each mattress one way, roll it up, and then from the sides and everything to make sure that there wasn't a big shank in there. Sometimes, if they're really good, you're going to miss some things in there because if you don't know exactly where that threading starts, you might think the mattress is good for whatever that's worth.
No, it's all worth a lot. So a plastic mirror adhered to the wall had been removed and remounted to conceal a tiny blade behind it. What to look for during a search, check adhesive edges for fingerprints, glue overflow, or dried residue. Tap and listen for a hollow sound versus mounted resistance. Shine a light at an angle to catch air gaps or bowing. And look behind frequently fogged or dusty mirrors for clean, touched areas. I also got a pillowcase seam that was slightly thicker than usual. Inside was a braided cord used for tattooing. What to look for during a search, run fingers along all seams for stiffness or cords. Look for uneven stitching patterns or thicker thread. Press gently on folds to detect internal mass and check for hand stitch repairs or new looking areas. I also got a tightly rolled sock inside a drawer was used as a decoy and actually contained a small glass pipe. What to look for, unroll even neatly folded socks and examine the interior. Check for excessive density or unusually firm rolls. Look for soot, residue, or smell transfer in the fabric and tap with a pen. Ceramic or glass may click inside. A clean and folded jumpsuit at the bottom of a footlocker had a small stash sewn into the collar lining. So what to look for, it kind of relates the same with the hat. Check collars, cuffs, and seams for double fabric or irregular stitching. Feel inside edges for stiffness or tape. Unroll or unfold everything, even if it's neatly stacked, and look for slight color variations at the threaded level. I also have a few more left, and we're done with this tip. A manila folder labeled medical records that hadn't been moved in weeks had a cavity in the spine filled with Suboxone. What to look for during a search, gently bend the folder spine to feel hollow space or thickness. Check if staples or brads have been manipulated. Look for off-center folds or uneven paper inside, and tap for sound inconsistencies near the folder center. Now, Russ, you talked about this before, but a soap bar that was hollowed out from the bottom and refilled with crushed medication. What to look for during a search, press your finger into the bottom for soft or reworked soap texture. Check for water resistance in odd areas. Resealed parts may repel water. And look for discoloration or scent inconsistency, and tap for hollowness or layering.
Yeah, I recommend against smelling anything in this day and age, just for what it's worth. Not just because it can be gross, but we all know that the fentanyl threat is very real out there. But yeah, all of these things, the list can just go on and on and on. I was talking about this one with someone the other day that had come across a video of how the inside of potato chip bags are really shiny, and so what inmates have done with that in the past is they can take that and fold and make a little strip, and then if they're in an area where you have highly controlled razor blades and stuff, they give them the razor in the shower and they can pop open and get the blade out and then put that shiny little piece back in there. And so then when the officer checks it, it looks good. We can just go on forever about, all the different tactics that the inmates have. But as I'm thinking them up, I'm putting them out there.
No, and I have two more last items here to wrap up tip one. A plastic meal tray with a slightly warped section was found to contain thin contraband slips in the false bottom. What to look for: inspect corners and bottoms for added seams or air bubbles. Look for heat warping or melted seams that don't match factory finish. Press gently to detect shifting contents or layered compartments, and tap with metal to listen for hollowness. What's cool about this, guys, even though it seems like a lot, we were able to find consistencies that I think could be taught and utilized to help no matter what could be altered. We found consistencies that can help you adapt and adjust to whatever changes the inmates may make. And then I got the last one here is a clipboard with inspection sheets, had a split panel, and documents hiding a flattened razor blade. So what to look for: open the clip and flex the back panel to detect separation. Use light to identify bulges, folds, or excessive tape. Compare thickness with other clipboards and slide papers one by one. Contraband may be flattened between sheets. You know what's unique here? I definitely found, consistent. I definitely find the use of light to be extremely important. I found flexibility, having an item you can compare it with that is from the factory. So it's great that we keep items consistent, that we don't just order from any vendor, that we make sure that we order from places that are consistent, so we know we're always getting the same item, and that's good for us because then we know what to expect. And again, I think that provided us just now. I did go a lot of examples there, but I knew if I did that, it would bring about some consistency, but also showcase the importance of certain things, as I mentioned, like the factory bought items, making sure they're the same. Again, the use of the flashlight, weight. And then Russ, the question I have here, which was for tip one, was why is it so important that correctional staff approach searches? Oh, no, sorry. The question I have here is how can officers, let me put it here because I have it here. How can officers recondition their eyes to pick up on what's too perfect or too static in a dynamic environment?
The only real answer to that is exposure. You have to get in there and you have to work and you have to do the searches and learn about what you're seeing, because there's so much going on, and the state of disrepair in a lot of the things we see can be really bad, and so that really helps them hide stuff a lot, because we're expecting things to look kind of disheveled and bad, and I mean I could go on and on about all of the things that I've found over the years. This is what I'll say though is get good exposure to that, so know what it is that you're looking at. Understand what your expectations about what you're looking at are, because your brain is going to fill in all kinds of crazy, silly stuff that may or may not be true. I actually talk about that once again in the Killing Complacency book, where I talk about the assumptions that we make. And then from there, be curious, be inquisitive, and test things out, and then ask yourself, Ask yourself, what is it that I'm looking at? Ask yourself, if I was an inmate, what would I do to be able to beat the system? I have one great example that someone at our institution found. We had, a problem, not a huge problem, but it was a problem with rodents. And this individual figured out that an inmate in his area where rodents would sometimes poop, that some of the poops weren't actually rodent poops. They were black tar heroin. They are very, very clever. Do not underestimate them.
Yeah, so these next tips will go by a little bit quicker, and then I have one longer tip, which I think is tip 6 or tip 7, and then we speed right back up to finish it off. All right, so tip number 2, these are the quicker tips right now, is interrupt your own routine. So tip, inmates track your behavior as closely as you track theirs. Always starting in the same place or following a set path gives them a map for hiding. An example, housing officer always began searches with the top bunks, inmates adjusted accordingly, stashing their items in bottom bunks or hiding contraband in areas he typically reached last. When the officer changed his starting point, he immediately uncovered a stash behind a ceiling tile. And someone mentioned outside of changing the routine is also our energy. You may be more energetic at the beginning of the search than you are towards the end, especially even motivation. If you're not finding anything at the beginning, you may become less motivated as you get closer to the end of the search. But Russ, what's your thoughts on interrupt your own routine?
Yeah, you believe it or not, inmates actually will keep a book on you. I've had inmates go so far as to actually bird dog me, which means they put somebody on me, and then if I'm getting too close to where they want, they start, doing things to hide whatever they've got there, which is a great compliment, actually, by the way. So, there's just, so much of this, so much of this, different stuff that goes on. I'll say that you just have to use those things, against them if you can. I used to, sometimes go out there and not go where I thought they didn't want me to go and just see what their reaction was going to be. And then call back down there and, home other people. And, hey, you know what? I think like maybe something's happening down there around 17. And they go in and make the bust. Just so many different ways you can play it. When they're looking at what you're doing, they're keeping book and they're finding out, what you're not searching, what you don't appear to be hip to. I have something once again in here where I talk about a particular who I had reason to believe was a certain type of gang member that would have been immediately, sent to Pelican Bay if he was validated. And I knew that a guy like that was going to have weaponry around him. And so just there for, a couple of weeks and stuff, I would go in there and I would search the same places in the same dorm, and I would let them watch me, and I would look like I just couldn't really care. And I just kind of like, half-ass everything that I did. And after about 2 weeks of that, I went back to where I knew there was a really good place to hide something. And I took out, a massive shank. So it's not just about searching. It's about having the right mental outlook and being able to figure out exactly what you can do. And sometimes it's laying traps. Sometimes it's giving them opportunities to fail.
Yeah, and I feel you touched on this, but if you have anything else you want to add, I said, what routines or habits do staff unintentionally fall into, and how can inmates exploit them to stay one step ahead? As I mentioned, I think energy dies out the more the search goes on, especially if you're not finding
Absolutely.
it. And I think the motivation changes towards the end. So it is definitely good that, you try to keep that energy as consistent, but it does help to go ahead and shift areas so you're giving each area the same amount of energy. But anything you'd like to add to that question, or we can move on to the next one?
No, it really is good to keep that in mind. Sometimes though, it's just not going to help you a lot because there's only so much that you can actually do. But if you keep it in mind, at least at some point, maybe even further down the line, you might be able to leverage it in some other way to make the play. And so that's why it's worth going into the deep thinking cycle.
Now I have tip 3, which is let behavior lead the search. Physical cues expose mental stress, sudden helpfulness, freezing, fake snoring, nervous watching. These are breadcrumbs. So I have an example. During a dorm-wide search, one inmate offered to help gather belongings for officers, seemingly cooperative, but his body language was overly energetic and forced. When staff searched his area first, they discovered Suboxone strips taped behind a light fixture. Russ, what are some subtle or common behaviors that signal something isn't right, and how can staff learn to trust their instinct?
So there's a lot of different things. Freezing, sudden noise, sudden fighting. I've seen many times where, because we'd entered a dorm, that suddenly a fight breaks out. Oh yeah, big surprise. And that just means that, hey, once you're done dealing with the fight, you better get back there and find out what's really up, because that obviously wasn't it. Like I said, when the noise level suddenly rises, or when the noise level, suddenly falls off, sudden helpfulness. I really like that one. Suddenly they start what I call over communication. And I actually deal with that a little bit in the book too, where they're either like too helpful, or they really, really want to ask a question, or they just do something to approach you. I had this one guy, I came into this dorm one time, and there was, maybe 4 or 5 guys in there. No one's doing anything, but he's laying on top of his bunk, and he's kind of a big guy. I mean, like really, really big. And so, he looks at me and he takes it upon himself to get up out of bed, get his shoes on, and come down there and ask me about what I'm doing. In the meantime, I'm just like looking up at the ceiling a lot. And I think that's what kind of like freaked him out a little bit. And he says, is something going on with the asbestos or something? Like, I think he thought that, I was going to like, oh, if there's asbestos up there, I'm not going to mess with it. So now I really know that something's going on. And within just a couple of feet of where I was and where I'd been hanging out, right after that, I got a dope and a weapon and a cell phone, all in one shot, all in one hiding spot. And the truth be known is I wasn't there to search. I was just down there, kind of like doing a little bit of a security audit in the area. And the problem that this guy had, though, is I had that reputation, and he was worried about the stuff that he had up there. And he was just, he couldn't help it. He thought he was going to draw me off of my game. He thought he was going to put some bug in my ear about asbestos or something. And so but it just wasn't so.
Right. Now this tip is not something I think we've ever really discussed. We may have hinted at, but definitely something I added, was it yesterday? So I got assume the mind is the first hiding spot. So tip, let's say before opening a drawer, opening a locker, whatever it is, assess the individual. What's their stress level? What's their angle? Contraband reflects motive. Know the person and you'll narrow the search. So an example, an officer knew an inmate had been under financial pressure and recently lost his job. During a routine search, he focused on commissary items. Tucked inside a sealed oatmeal pack was a razor blade. So how can knowing an inmate's mental state or motive, whether desperation or control, lead staff to more targeted, intelligent searches? That's for you, Russ.
Yeah. So with that, what I would say is different inmates, are doing different things and having different needs and having different motivations all of the time. A lot of times you'll see these guys, they have a hustle of one kind or another. You'll see the guy, he's the real tattoo artist. And so what am I likely to find in common areas that are near him? What am I likely to find in his cell, around his bunk? Well, one thing I'm likely to find is I'm likely to find an ink factory. I'm likely to find, some guitar strings that they're using for needles. I'm likely to find some motors or some things like that. I had one particular individual one time, his hustle was fixing electronics. And I was able to take away from him some little teeny tiny like screwdrivers that he had made. And, one of them was a flat blade and one of them was a little Phillips deal and some things like that. And then he had also made, by using the rheostat out of a fan, he had made a soldering iron. And so people's radios would break and things like that. And he was taking them apart and doing all of that. So, it's just that different people are doing different things, and so those guys, they have one thing that they're doing. The tweakers and the guys that always want to be on the nod from heroin, they have a different motive for what they're doing. The gangbangers that are, down hardcore for the cause, they're going to be, looking at, packing some heat of some kind. So, everyone has their place to. Everyone has their own little thing that they're trying to do, and we do ours, and we go in there and we take it away from them.
Yeah, and guys, again, these are good lessons because a lot of people think that what we do is simple, but there's a lot that is going on, and this is why we have these dialogues. So there's a lot here. So I got number 5 is ignore the reputation. That's supposed to be good or bad. So let me add a D to that. I must have forgot to add the D. So that model inmate could be running the biggest hustle. That problem inmate could be used as a diversion. Never let character replace confirmation. The example I have here is an inmate known for cleaning the staff break room and helping officers with errands was rarely searched. Eventually, a surprise search revealed he had been storing vape pens in the mop handle. Discussion, Russ. Okay, so I got a question for you on this one, Russ. How can preconceived notions about good or bad inmates become blind spots, and what systems can help staff stay objective?
So you have to treat the potential of the threat differently from the way you treat your perception of the threat. I have one. I think we've talked about it a couple times. I had an inmate who was my clerk, and we were getting ready to do a mass search. And this guy's a really good clerk. He's one of those guys. Even we'll cut him some slack on some things. But he immediately approached me over communication and said, "Hey, I might have a little bit of extra stuff in my area. Good to know." And I'm, sometimes guys, they have a little bit of extra stuff in the area. But that told me something about that guy. That told me that he was much more worried than he wanted to let on. So I took, one of my great officers and said, "Hey, look, let's go down and let's make this particular search really, really down to the nitty gritty, and let's see what we find." And we ended up finding a DVD player and all kinds of DVDs, porn, of course, because his little hustle that he did was he would rent out his DVD player and the porn and whatnot. But what was really more concerning was the love letters we found from a teacher in education, and some of the kind of, let's just say, frauds and scams that were being run in the local town. And this was also the very first inmate that we ever found a cell phone. And we found that cell phone in his property because we were rolling his property up. We'd actually started to run out of time. And then, the thing's just buzzing inside an Irish Spring box or whatever. So don't assume that just because they're doing a good job for you, that they're pure, as it were.
And again, that's the psychological part, the psychological game. Now, this is one of the longer tips, and after that, we speed right through. But this is signs for micro-tampering. So think like a contractor. What looks off? Loose screws, tampered seams, worn out furniture corners, point inconsistencies, anything that interrupts the factory norm. So there was an example I got, which a control room tech noticed the vent cover had fresh tool marks and slightly different screws. Behind it was a stash of sharpened plastic pieces prepped as potential weapons. So let me give you guys some examples here. We'll speed through these, and Russ, stop me when you feel you can add something. But I figure we can go through these. But okay, so I got mismatched screws. So screws securing furniture, vents, or fixtures may be replaced after tampering. Small differences often go unnoticed. So what do you look for? Check for different screw types, Phillips, flathead, Torx, or the same on the same panel. Look for changes in screw colors, length, or threading. Inspect screw heads for strip slots, rust, or shiny wear, and feel for looseness or resistance when touched or
That's
turned.
the one.
Okay, go ahead, Russ.
Looseness.
Yeah, Russ.
Okay, so all of these things are important, but just as an aside, because we don't always know what goes on in our area, and some of the people that we work with aren't always hip as to what can be going on. But I was in this one particular day room area, and there were these wooden benches that were bolted down around the walls. And I got to where one of these benches was, and I looked up underneath, and because I don't trust anything, I reached back and I grabbed this bolt. And of course, I didn't like have wrenches or anything with me, but I could feel that it was just loose. And I thought, there's nothing really here that looks like there's anywhere to hide anything. It's just a loose bolt, and it's only going to be about that long. But I said, what the hell? Somebody loosened it. Somebody was going to take it. Something was being done here. And so I kept messing with it long enough to get it completely loose and pulled it up and pulled back the board. And lo and behold, I guess that the one maintenance guy had let these guys loose in there with a bunch of power tools, and they had taken and routed out the entire side of that board and made a hollow spot in it, and then put that bolt back in there. And their mistake was in not tightening that thing down, because, well, it's probably hard for them to actually have a wrench around, because that gets found and we're going to ask additional questions, obviously. So that's a good point. The least little thing can turn you on to something much bigger.
Right. I have a few more. I got patchy or glossy point description. Inmates may repaint or regloss an area to hide welding, cuts, or burn marks from tampering. So what to look for: scan surfaces for paint that's shinier or duller than the rest. Look at edges and corners for rushed or uneven application. Use angled lighting to catch texture differences. I'm telling you, that flashlight is a needed tool. And compare point color and finish to surrounding surfaces. And comparing and contrasting is also a tool that we as officers should have. We should be trying to fine tune that as much as we can. I have worn or bulging seams on lockers or furniture. Description: seams along metal or wood lockers may be pried open, then reshaped or filled. So what to look for: run your fingers along seams to feel raised edges or gaps. Look for bulges, creases, or misalignment in panels. Tap near seams and listen for dull or hollow tones, kind of we touched on before. Check for fine dust or metal shavings indicating tampering. And then we talked about false bottoms and panels. So inmates create fake compartments using layered materials or by altering factory design. So tap the surface. Hollow sounds may indicate voids. Look for warping, lifted corners, or glue residue. Push or lift an area that feels off to check for give, and compare with untouched examples of the same item. Again, that comparing and contrasting. Sealing tiles with smudges or fingerprints. Tiles out of reach may be accessed with makeshift tools. Clean hands leave marks behind. What to look for during a search: scan tile surfaces for finger or palm prints. Look at tile corners for misalignment or sagging. Use a flashlight to check for dust patterns. Disturbed dust can indicate tampering. And notice tile angles that don't sit flush with the grid. Anything there? Was that flashlight tool?
Yeah, yeah, all of that. Yeah, I've found a million things because of my flashlight and my mirror. So I would always have my flashlight. I would always have my mirror. I always had an extendable thing for my mirror so I could get up underneath places. I always had magnets on some strings so I could fish down there. I always had my mechanics tool, the little grabber, so I could fish things out. Oftentimes at the beginning of my shift, I'd go get a little toolkit from control so I could take things apart. All of those are really important. But, really just being in the moment and thinking things through. We had a great officer at San Quentin, and they were doing a refurbishing of all of these trailers that were housing units down in what was called H unit at the time. And anyway, so inmate day labor crews were going in there and putting on all new sheetrock and stuff. And one of these officers had come across a piece of paper in one of the other dorms. He said, "Man, this looks like a map." And so he started looking around and just went, "Hey, I don't know. I mean, this is all fresh sheetrock, but what the heck?" Took the baton to it where the light switch was, and these guys had pre-positioned lots and lots and lots of weapons in different areas for a rainy day when they might not otherwise have access to weapons. And so being present in the moment and finding those small details that are out of place or a treasure map is all good.
I'll tell you something, Russ. I'm about ready to send you something in your email if you ever want it. Maybe you could do it. If it's your call, if you have time. I think maybe if you want, you could do a whole video on how a flashlight is a great tool for us in corrections. I mean, a whole video on how to properly use that flashlight. I mean, I just looked up, just to add to our discussion. Look at this, Russ. It's amazing, obviously search and inspection. I think if you're a rookie, you got to listen to this real quick. Senior officers should know this, but search and inspection, checking door corners of cells or dorms, illuminating under bunks and mattresses, scanning vents, ceilings, and light fixtures, inspecting toilets and plumbing for contraband, examining mouth, ears, and body during strip searches, looking into property bins and lockers, checking laundry bags, folded linens, inspecting recreation. I mean, it's just tools for control. Use to like, I mean, there's just so much here. Officer safety. Yeah, Russ. I mean, if you ever want, I sent it to you. If you ever want to, there's a lot here, man. I don't want to get off topic. Kind of let you know.
No,
man,
it's a great tool, and one of the things I used to do all the time, especially when I knew that I was going to be clicking somebody up pretty quick, is I get close to them and shine that light in their eyes, and then from there on, they're kind of like momentarily where they can't see real well, start giving them verbal commands, and less likely that they're going to, jump you or try and run or do something else silly. Gives you a little tiny bit of a tactical edge, but I used to take every bit I could get.
Yeah, I think it would make for a great show. I sent you I emailed it to you if you ever want to maybe do. There's a lot there, though. Me and my exhausted list. Okay, so let's get to the next one. I got bent or warped vent grates. So air vents are a common stash spot. Tampering usually leaves subtle bends or makeshift repairs. What to look for: examine screws or fasteners. Look for glue, gum, which they shouldn't have in facilities, but it happens, or alternative bolts. Press on the grate to test for.
I was going to say hair thread or strings around vents all the time, all day long. Because what they'll do is they'll take and they'll throw stuff back there attached to, sometimes it's hair, sometimes it's thread, sometimes it's a string, and then then it's far enough back there that you either got to reach for it or they'll take and loop it around a little screw or something like that.
All right, so I have I pretty much, that's what it is. So I have examine screws or fasteners, as I mentioned. Look for glue, gum, or alternate bolts. Press on the grate to test for looseness or flexibility. Look for scratches, pry marks, or warped metal, and check for abnormal airflow or sounds. Good. That's why it's always good to have maintenance on board with what we're doing here too, as well. Tool marks or scarring on frames and fixtures. Inmates use improvised tools to cut or wedge access points. These leave marks if you know where to look. So again, scan metal for scratch lines, scoring or drill punctures. Look around screw holes and bracket joints for wear. Feel edges for rough or uneven surfaces, and use a flashlight to catch reflective tool marks. That's a great tip. Glue.
Yeah, It's a little different in this day and age when some places are now allowing officers to carry their cell phones with them. But one thing that I used to do is I would like try and at least take little notes because I would see all kinds of scarring and little bit, and just if you can take note, or better yet, if you can take a picture and see what things looked like a week ago versus the way they look now, and see if something's really been messed with. It's a great indicator, and it can save you a lot of time, I've found.
Oh, yeah. Now, I also have, again, we talked about glue residue or sticky seams. Tempered joints or reassembled hides are often held together with toothpaste, melted plastic, or adhesive. So you want to rub along seams to check for stickiness or grit. Inspect for discoloration or shine near cracks. Look under bunk, rails, lockers, or shelving edges, and smell for odd odors. Again, be careful with the smelling. We talked about that before. Glue or cleaning agents used to mask tampering. So that maybe people will try to overuse something to minimize the smell of toothpaste or whatnot, whatever they're using for the adhesive. I have misaligned hardware or panels. So bed frames, shelving, or mounted items may be slightly shifted after reinstallation. So check for uneven gaps between bolted sections. Compare alignment with other bunks or fixtures. Wiggle items gently to test stability, and look for washer or bolt replacement that don't match. Hey, Russ, real quick, nothing, but when you decide to do the book on this, because it definitely, I think you're going to have a great book after we go through all this. I think it would be good to also add a little section about the flashlight. Just in my head, just wanted to get it out there. Loose or offset electrical outlets. Inmates sometimes remove or fake outlet covers to create small storage areas. So gently press outlets. They should be secure and flush. Look for missing screws or ones that don't match. Shine a light into the box to check depth and wiring. And be cautious. Always assume outlets could be live. I have discoloration in grout or paint edges. So patch jobs after wall tampering often leave faint color shifts or texture mismatches. Look closely at grout lines or paint along corners. Compare tile spacing and height. Any shift is a clue. Check for crack caulking or lifted paint bubbles, and shine light at a shallow angle to reveal texture changes. Again, look at the use of this flashlight.
Yeah.
Again, Russ.
I was just gonna say, man, me and my flashlight,
Yeah,
and you gotta, it's gotta be really powerful too, because it's difficult to see stuff in the shadows, especially if it's bouncing, off of a mirror or whatever. But so many times, flashlight was the difference between. Well, I used to call them, hat tricks. If I could get three significant, not just anything, but it had to be cell phone, weapon, or dope. If I could get three of those in any night, that was my hat trick. And sometimes I would get all three, and sometimes once a couple times I got like a double hat trick. I once had, oh gosh, what was it? It was like I think I got 7 shanks in one day one time. So it's all good, and that flashlight, yeah. Without it, I would not have done as well.
Hey, Russ, if you ever want to do that video solo, I gave him, and it's funny when you said me and my flashlight. At first, I thought, oh, that would be a great kids book, and then I thought the other extreme. Be careful, that could also be an adult book. So just it just kind of balanced on both sides.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, that was a good title though. So I have unusual symmetry. Contraband is often hidden in places that are overly neat or too perfect. So be suspicious of overly balanced arrangements. Watch for identical stacks, rolls, or folds. Check repeated patterns that aren't seen in other areas and disrupt the setup. See what the inmates react to. I have bulges behind bulletin boards or calendars. Description. Okay, so inmates sometimes hide items behind wall hung materials, which edges, bulges, or curls. What to look for. Okay, peel corners and check for resistance or weight. Look for push pin holes that don't match patterns. Use a flashlight along the surface to reveal warps, and check for markings or dirt indicating movement that's behind it. I got discover friction or obstruction. Hidden items behind or beneath drawers create unnatural resistance. So what to look for? Open drawers slowly. Resistance may signal obstruction. Tap under and behind for echoes or knockbacks. Remove drawers entirely to inspect hidden crevices and check tracks for shavings, paddings, or tape. And then we have last one is altered ventilation slots. Vent slots may be bent open, covered, or expanded to conceal items behind them. Inspect for widening between slots, especially on return vents. Look for cloth, tape, or paper blocking internal view. Tap for hollow space or shift in airflow, and check screws or slots for pry marks and loosening. And Russ, there was a question I had here for you at the very beginning of this related to this, and it was it's right here. Hold on. What are some common forms of micro-tampering staff might overlook, and how can we train officers to read the room like a builder or inspector?
A lot of times it just has to do with, you trying to, manipulate it, because oftentimes these things, they'll look fine. I'll never forget, we used to have through a series of dorms that we had, there was a major, huge plenum that would go through all of them. And then down the Broadway where the bunks were, up above, you could see, all of these different vents that would come out. And so when I would get up on those vents, all of those things, they were put in place with pop rivets. So what I learned is that these inmates, they had enough time that, they could sometimes, find a pop rivet that had already fallen out somewhere else, or if they could move one enough that they could get it to fall out and then just put it back in place, and it would still hold the vents in place. And so what I would do is I used to get these little thin, really flexible mirrors, and I would cut them into like little triangles, and then I could slip them around the corner back there, and I could see if anything was being hidden, and I didn't actually have to mess with the vents at that point. And then if I would see something back there, then I would know that one of those vents had been hinked with, and then I would spend the extra time to figure out, which pin to pull to pull it out. And many times, I would pull out, gallons of pruno. Many times I recovered shanks. There was a little lip just as you went past that area that your mirror couldn't see in. And so once I got the vent out, I would, look along there, and so many times I would find, some type of weapon, or I would find a little bit of dope, or I would find cell phones. And so all of those things, you get to know some of their techniques, and you can use them against them. And so I would go in there when no one was in there and just, do a quick thing with that little tiny thin wisp of a ribbon of a mirror, and just shine my flashlight and be able to detect any major contraband in there really quickly.
Man, I'm looking forward to that flashlight video. Okay, and then, that book, I think we could work on that one book. Okay, so track how the environment reacts to them. So watch the zone, not just the inmate. Does no one sit near their bed? Do they hover around one locker? Do they dominate shared spaces without touching them? So I have an example here. Now we're going to speed through the rest of these tips. In a dorm setting, no one ever sat at a specific table, even when others were full. When officers searched the table's underside, they found a magnet with secured pill bottles. So how can an inmate spatial control, or how others behave around them, give away where power or contraband is concentrated? That's for you.
Yeah, it's always about the buzz, and they will just change up, and you'll see it in their eyes. You get that deer in the headlights look. You get that thing where suddenly the volume goes up, suddenly the volume goes down. One of the ones, and people should pay close attention to this, one of the ones that I used to use all the time was, as I walked into an area, especially if they weren't really expecting me, I would watch who was walking where. They tend to suddenly pick up the tempo a little bit, moving in a direct line away from where the item is, usually. Sometimes they might have the item on them, but usually they want to get as far away from the item as they can immediately. because that's what humans do at the subconscious level. And so many a times I've just like, traced the line back, boom, it must be right there. And so, there's a million of these little things, but that's a really good one is watching where they're moving away from.
All right. Hey, Russ, before we get to that next tip, if you ever decide to let's do that course, whatever it is, and you're out there at a conference, right? And we're going to call the course Me and My Flashlight. Would this be good music for you to walk out on?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I'll make sure that I got my mustache grown out and all of that.
All right, we're almost done. Hold on, guys. A few more last tips. We're going to speed through these. This is a unique one, Russ, I thought of. Test the boundaries they try to create. So verbal manipulation often starts before the physical hide. If they say that's my legal stuff or you don't need to touch that, that's your invitation to dig deeper, sort of what you touched on before with the clerk. So an inmate warned staff not to open a large envelope marked confidential legal material. Inside were rolling papers and a cell phone charger wrapped in legal printout. So how do inmates use verbal red flags or protected categories like legal, religious, hygiene to discourage searches? And how can staff navigate this with respect and confidence? And when I say hygiene, sometimes we'll say, "Oh, that's just my dirty clothes." What do you got?
Yeah, I'll just say it again. It's all encapsulated in that one word that I give people to think about, and that's over communication. Anytime someone goes from imparting information to trying to convince you, it's a red flag. It's the convincing part. If someone is just giving you information, oh yeah, this, that, and the other thing, it's probably not a red flag. I won't say always because these guys are clever. Some of them know, how to play the neuro-linguistic game. But whenever they do that shift that goes from imparting information to trying to convince you, man, that's the instant. And that's the way I used to think about it, man. The instant they shift that gear into trying to convince me, now I know for a fact that something is here. And very rarely did that ever fail me.
All right, got a few more tips. Hold on, this is a good one, Russ. I think this may be your favorite one. This one coming right here. I think your favorite, the one before that was tip 6, because I saw you very invested in the hiding. But I think that this one is extremely important for you because this is dynamic, it's fluid, and it's time is a factor. Use it and watch it. And this is what I got here. Contraband isn't always in place. It moves, especially in dorms. Observe movement patterns and safe windows. Count, showers, rec, shift change, meal delivery. Example, officers monitoring shift change cameras noticed an inmate consistently passed a sealed folder to a janitor during transition. Inside was an envelope filled with loose tobacco and SIM cards. So, Russ, why is it critical to think of searches as time-sensitive operations, and what patterns should staff watch for in terms of movement and handoff windows?
So you've got to understand that the inmates do a number of different countermeasures right against us. Some of them are effective, some of them are just perfunctory, but you have to understand it. It's kind of like a dance a little bit. And so when they're trying to do things, they will move contraband to areas that they consider more safe if it's worth the risk doing so. So one day, out there on the yard, I had this great tower officer, and man, these guys, they would constantly forget about my tower officers. And so I would pull them all into my intrigue and whatever. But he calls me up and says, hey, he says, something looks a little bit off on the yard and I'm not sure what it is. So I called down to the other end and I said, hey, what's going on down there? And so one of my other officers had a confrontation with a guy who was a Grape Street Crip, and had threatened that he was going to move all of those guys out or whatever. And I was like, oh, really? And so I didn't have a lot of time for the setup because now I already had an idea that there might be some things in motion, especially if you guys know what a Grape Street Crip is. And so I called back up to the tower. I said, hey, any of those guys that are out there from that one dorm, tell me where they're at. And he says, hey, there's one guy down here and he keeps leaning up against dorm 9 like he's going to pass something in. And so right then, it was very time sensitive. And so I immediately went out myself, and I knew that it was probably not the best thing for me to be out there by myself, because I thought they might hit on that. But I tried to, put my best, like, oh, I'm just golly gee shucking my way down the way or whatever. And I see 2 of my officers coming to me, and I was really worried about using the radio, because sometimes inmates will put themselves in proximity to radios to be able to hear things. And so it's better to use an earpiece if you can. So I saw these guys, and man, I gave them the old wink, and man, they were both like right on me, and I just immediately started, talking some, stupid stuff to them about, doing an inspection on the other yard and stuff like that. And so as we got down to this guy, I could tell that, he was really lighting us up with his eyes. He had that deer in the headlight look, but he was so close to the dorm that I knew I couldn't approach him. And so I just waited a little bit until we got past him. And then the instant we got past him, I looked back over my shoulder. He stepped off of the cement apron there. And then as he started to walk away, he looked back over his shoulder. And by that time, the whole thing was blown, right? And so I ended up in a foot pursuit with him. He ran back. He ran back to where the other dorm was, and we ended up taking 4 weapons off of him. And so, sometimes you just have to make the play. Sometimes you just have to know who the players are. In this case, the Grape Street Crips. Easy to say, oh, those guys are going to have weapons for sure. And then it just all turned out because things just happened to come together. And so if that's what we're talking about time sensitive things, sometimes it's just about go, go, go.
Yeah. Hey, Russ, I noticed during the transition of shifts, we could be very vulnerable. When you're doing your count, once you pass up one area, they know you may not likely come back right away. So, I mean, you could definitely see passing of items on wings. And the moment you leave that wing to go count another. So maybe it's good to backstep once in a while, or definitely the transition of shifts when you're trying to exchange information. They know how long that's going to take, for you to kind of exchange the information and then, pick up and take over the unit. So, I mean, those are areas where you want to maybe try to break away from that routine. I know for me, if I did a count on one wing, maybe I may go back before I finish the count just to kind of go down and see if there's any moving around. That's when you usually catch something. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting tip. Now I have this one, Russ. Don't let discomfort become blindness. Inmates learn where you hesitate. Hygiene bags. Again, we talked about religious texts, legal folders. These are high value stash zones because staff may avoid them. I think we touched on this. Staff avoided searching a prayer rug out of discomfort. A new officer, unaware of this pattern, inspected it and found strips of Suboxone sewn into the fringe. So I had as a question here, what categories do staff often avoid, intentionally or not? And how can leadership reinforce that respectful searching doesn't mean avoiding? So we're talking about legal mail, medical records, religious
Medicine
items.
bags.
What did you just say? What was that?
I said medicine bags.
Medicine bags. So I
for
mean,
for Native Americans. I bring that one up because I forced a search on a guy one time, and he had about a 4.5-inch obsidian arrowhead in his medicine bag. And yeah, people they worry, when we're on the fringe of these civil rights, and you just got to, put yourself into a position to do it right. Know some of that state law, know some of that case law, know some of that federal law, and, know what you can do and what you can't do. And so when I'm going into someone's legal mail, I just don't read it. But I'll tell you what, if things show up that aren't about the legal thing, then you know what? If I can identify, hey, it's some dope or it's this or that, take the whole thing and start the evidence chain right away. That's and because it's nothing to fool around with. We've seen too many times where they use a fake address to send in heroin or whatever it is. So
yeah, I don't know if anybody noticed my studio changed. Usually locked in the basement. Now I'm in the some bedroom. Okay, so let's see. I have 3 more and then we're done, Russ. This is a lot, but hopefully you can make a class out of this, if anybody sees the video and you want to break it down. So I also have think multi-layered. Rarely is contraband hidden plainly. A decoy, like a fake stash, might be a deliberate distraction. True hides may be behind, inside, or beneath an obvious one. Example, a deodorant stick had a removable core with pills inside. Beside it was a more obvious contraband find, tobacco in a sock, which served as the decoy. So you got the red herring. So, Russ, why do inmates use layered deception? And how can officers avoid the trap of thinking the first find is the final find?
Yeah, sometimes. So there are a couple of things that they do. They'll use the decoy thing. They'll put some things out there. I call it sacrificial contraband, right? So when we're talking about sacrificial contraband, it's something usually that's absolutely forbidden, but can be easily replaced. So one of the things that can't be easily replaced, of course, is dope. Tobacco, not so much. Things to do with like tattooing and that kind of thing. Generally, it warrants our interdiction. But that stuff is so rampant that, they're willing to put it out there. So think about it in those terms, sacrificial contraband. The other thing that happens though, is there will be sometimes, some really serious contraband in an area, and we're all good to get that. And what we don't realize is that, hiding places are at a premium. And so where one hiding place is, sometimes there's another one. And I've seen many times where I've come up and found significant, serious contraband. And I take a breath. I say, no, we got to keep going here because there could be something else. I was teaching a young guy once and went up into a vent of all things, found a fishing line, pulled out a huge ball of dope. And anyway, he was jazzed. I was jazzed. And I said, hey, here's the one thing that you always need to do is you always need to make sure that you never stop searching when you find something like this. And I looked over and I kicked this 5-gallon bucket and it was full of pruno. And so, but I've had that happen so many times. When you find something, do not stop searching because it could be a decoy or it could just be the tip of the iceberg. Either way.
Yeah, you get some people who want to be recognized, and the moment they find something, they take it as a win. They get distracted, and there's still more stuff there to find, but they're just so happy they caught the one item that was probably in a public area, and it was probably there for them to be found. All right, so I got 2 more, Russ. I think this is another one of your favorite tips. I found this in a video. Use the reverse search strategy. So watch what inmates do after the search, not just what you do during it. Where do they rush to? What do they fix? The follow-up behavior can betray what you missed. So an example, after a dorm-wide search, one inmate rushed to fix his mattress seam while others stayed relaxed. Inside the seam, folded pieces of foil and melted pen casing. So what kind of post-search behavior should staff be trained to observe, and how can follow-up surveillance turn a clean search into a successful one?
Yeah, especially if you're walking away relatively empty-handed, they don't know for sure whether or not you've hit on what they have. And, being the kind of people they are, and dope being at a premium, sometimes, 10, maybe even 20 times, the price on the outside, they're going to be very worried about that stash. And the first thing that they're going to want to do is they're going to want to see it and secure it. Because, it really wrenches them at the gut level, especially if it's methamphetamine, because those people are tweakers. So, so if you're able to see where they rush back to and what they check first, it might be an indication that you need to get right back in there and check it out. it's also an indicator for future things. Figure out why you missed that spot in the first place. Why didn't you come up? Why weren't you able to make that play?
And the last one, we did it, Russ. This was a longer one, but it's good information. Train with real examples, not just checklists. So review actual contraband finds from your facility. Study the why behind the where. Ask, how did this work? Why did we almost miss it? Example, a training class reviewed an incident where a broken TV remote had been used to store pills. It sparked a facility-wide retraining on routine object searches. So, Russ, how can using real contraband cases, not just policy, create more intuitive, effective searchers in today's correctional environment?
So you can definitely, sometimes get a little hip as to where, the brand new hotspots are to hide things. More than that, though, is I tend to try and look at the individuals. There's some individuals that are willing to take significantly more risk with regards to weapons, with regards to dope, with regards to cell phones. So when I look at that, those are always people that I'm trying to triangulate on. And, I know that I may have mentioned this before, but, sometimes some of the ways I would come up on cell phones is I would just, look at guys that had cell phones, caught with them in the past, because they tend to be the ones that are also moving the dope. And so they can afford to get the cell phone in if they don't have a real good conduit themselves. Let's just put it that way. And so then when I used to, look at the people that were on their visiting list, I would just find people with unusual names, like I would avoid people like the Donald Browns and the John Smiths, but other ones. And then I would just, look them up on social media. And there were times where I literally from home, walked people into where phones were being used at the time and hitting on these people through triangulation. And all triangulation is you walk across the forest until you find the breadcrumbs, and then you follow them one way or the other. And that's really all it is. And so that's just some of the things that come up when you're trying to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and guys, obviously, the best training is training that's, adds the pressure. You don't want people to be doing this, walking through, knowing it's a training. No, I want them to feel the pressure. I want them to do this as if it's the real thing. Obviously, it has to be safely done, but you got to provide as much as you can something as realistic as what they need to go through when they're actually doing the job. And the closing thought I have for this, Russ, is searches are not a box to check. They're a test of attention, adaptability, and awareness. The most dangerous items aren't just hard to find. They're intentionally easy to overlook. There's a contrast. Every tip above isn't just a strategy. It's a mindset shift. Start thinking like the inmate, and your instincts will do the rest. And the last question, Russ, if I could give it to you, and you could wrap it up in your closing as well, is what separates a procedural searcher from a tactical one, and how do we foster that curiosity mindset across all levels of staff? So maybe you could put this into your closing as we sign off.
So the thing that I'll say about this is, there are some people that are just willing to do whatever it takes to succeed at that level. I believe that I was one of those people. Because I was always, making things happen, and finding a way to shut down the contraband, or especially the weapons, man. I loved finding weapons. So you'll find people, though, that are, just about checking the boxes, and they're not invested in finding out about, how gangs think, or about, how the tweaker in the dorm is thinking, or about the gangbanger, who's trying to come up and wield influence. And all of these are different people that are all involved in different games. And you have to be able to see the big picture about how it all fits together. The gangbangers are really super reliant on the addicts, because without them, they wouldn't have the money or the influence to be able to do the type of violence that they do. So when you start to get a really cohesive look at what's going on and you're able to put it all together, you can get out there and you can make find after find after find. You can influence events to come out in your favor. Sometimes they don't, but a lot of times you can, and you can put yourself into the position to be able to make the play and really change things. It's just one of those things, though, that there's going to be another subset of officers who are much more functionary. They often do a good job, but they really never catch on to what's really going on around them. It's kind of a inattentional blindness kind of thing, and they're always stuck on the outside of the onion, and they never understand how many layers deep it actually goes.
Yeah. So, guys, I think a show like this today was to kind of, yes, show the tactical, but to let you know that this is a lot more than just grunt work. I mean, you have to get into the mind of the people that you oversee it, and not in a manner where it makes you dangerous, but, where you understand what it is that you're dealing with. That's the key. It's to find that balance, not to absorb it, but to find it, understand it, and work with it, so you can go ahead and get ahead of the game. There's a lot.
Let me show you something, Anthony.
Okay,
I'm going to say, I don't know if they can see this, but this chapter 9, tactical empathy. Really being able to put yourself into the place of other people, and that's just one more chapter. It was amazing to me how many different things came up that were actually in the book, but that is a real true thing. If you can know and understand how an inmate thinks, how risk averse they are, and what they're willing to do or not do, then all you have to do is be in the right place at the right time to leverage that against them.
Yes, and guys, maybe Russ will help us out with that flashlight video. But again, guys, hopefully you find this is a good lesson. Utilize it, put it out there. I think we covered a lot here. Hopefully people, enjoy the content. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe. Hey, Russ.